Hello, lovelies. Excuse the noise in the background today. If you hear anything, it's because there are works in my street and somehow it feels like it's happening in my own living room. So I hope it's going to be okay. Okay, so today I want to have a real honest conversation about desire because I see so many women struggling with it, trying to figure out why they don't feel the way they used to, or why desire feels unpredictable, inconsistent, or just gone. And if that's you, I want to offer you a new perspective today, one that will help you stop chasing desire and instead understand how it actually works, what fuels it, and how you can cultivate more of it in your life and relationship. Because here's what I've learned, both from my own experience and from coaching so many women through this. The way we think about desire is often the very thing blocking us from feeling it. So in today's episode, I'm sharing 5 major lessons that have completely transformed the way I see desire, and hopefully they'll do the same for you. Okay, let's dive in. Lesson 1 is our expression of desire isn't static. It shifts between spontaneous and responsive. Let me explain. If you've been listening to this podcast, by now you've heard me talk about spontaneous and responsive desire about 1,000 times. But let me quickly refresh this for the newbies. Spontaneous desire means you feel desire out of nowhere, before anything sexual even happens. It often sparks just from a thought, a glance, or even just existing next to your partner. Studies suggest that this is the case for a majority of men. Responsive desire means desire emerges in response to a certain level of stimulation. You don't feel turned on until something pleasurable is already happening. And studies suggest that this is the case for a majority of women. While all desire follows some form of stimulation, the key difference is that spontaneous desire has a lower threshold. It can be sparked by something as simple as a thought or a glance, whereas responsive desire requires more buildup and the right context. But here's the thing. These aren't fixed categories. You're not locked into one or the other forever. We tend to think of ourselves as having a type of desire, like we're either someone who has a high sex drive or a low one, someone who experiences spontaneous desire or responsive desire, which, by the way, isn't the same thing. Spontaneous versus responsive desire is about how your desire shows up, whereas a high versus a low sex drive is about how frequently you feel it. They're not the same thing exactly, but many people will tend to mistake the two because a person with responsive desire will tend to initiate less because they don't necessarily feel like having sex before things get started. So it can look like they have less libido, but it's not the case. So as I was saying, we tend to think of ourselves as either being spontaneous or responsive. But your expression of desire is fluid and it will evolve throughout your life, your relationship, and even from one partner to another. At the start of a relationship, people tend to feel desire more spontaneously because novelty, excitement, and the rush of early romance naturally fuel it. Over time, that can shift. As novelty wears off and familiarity sets in, you might find that desire now needs more context, more buildup, more intentionality, which means it's not gone, it's just different. And this doesn't just happen over the course of a relationship. It can also shift depending on your life stage, stress levels, health, emotional connection, even who you're with. For example, I generally tend to be a more spontaneous desire type of person, but I've noticed that I oscillate between spontaneous and responsive depending on what's happening in my life. In a past relationship where there was no emotional safety and connection, I was 1,000% spontaneous because sex was the only place where I felt connected, seen, and where my partner gave me his undivided attention. So looking back, I realize my brain was seeking safety and connection through sex. It was my only way to feel close, so I wanted it constantly. Now, in my current relationship where I feel deeply loved, safe, and connected outside of sex, my brain isn't using sex as a survival mechanism anymore. So, when my chronic inflammation and mental health implications of having PCOS, endometriosis, and lipedema get really bad, I can shift into responsive desire because my brain is prioritizing energy elsewhere, like surviving the inflammation. So, if you've been thinking, I used to want sex all the time, what's wrong with me? Well, nothing's wrong. Your desire is fluid, and this is natural. The key is learning how to work with these changes instead of seeing them as a problem. Also, I want you to realize that the expression of your desire doesn't define you. The problem with wanting to identify as one thing, like having a high sex drive or spontaneous desire, for example, is that when it changes, and it will, because it's fluid, it can feel like an identity crisis. Instead of panicking when things shift, the key is to learn to understand how you operate. I know I have spontaneous desire a majority of the time. I know what that means and how to work with that. And I also know that given certain context, specifically chronic health issues for me, I have more responsive desire. And I also know how to work with that. This awareness allows me to navigate mismatches with my partner, whether I'm in the mood and he isn't, or vice versa. And this might still change. I might evolve into a more responsive desire type over time, or maybe my desire will become even more spontaneous as I get better at managing inflammation. The point here is to stop making it a big deal. Desire is fluid. It doesn't define you or your relationship. Just understand what's going on so you can navigate accordingly. Lesson number 2, what turns you on or off changes. Your turn-ons and turn-offs are contextual and also evolve over time. Scientists call these your sexual accelerator and brakes. Your accelerator is the gas pedal. It's all the things that tell your brain, yes, this is a good time for sex right now. Maybe that's a flirty text, feeling rested, or your partner doing the dishes. Yes, please. Your brakes are what slam the whole thing to a stop. All the things that tell your brain there are more pressing issues than sex right now. That can be stress, exhaustion, feeling unsupported, negative body image, resentment, even something as small as the laundry piling up. A major reason why women struggle with desire is that they expect their turn-ons to stay the same forever. And when they change, they feel confused or even broken. But just like your desire type, your accelerator and brakes also evolve. I always think about this woman from a presentation I gave on desire at a business club for women in Belgium a few years ago. She was in her late 40s or had just turned 50, and she said to me, I used to know what I liked, and now I have no idea. And she sounded like it was a problem. And my instant reaction was to tell her, aren't you glad though? You get to rediscover yourself. How amazing is that? I meant it then, and I mean it now. Wouldn't it be boring if your intimacy stayed the same throughout your entire life? Wouldn't you rather have new things to uncover as you go along? Your turn-ons, just like your career goals, hobbies, passions, dreams, aspirations, will change over time as you grow and evolve as a human being. And here's something even more interesting. Your sensitivity to the things that turn you on or off can also change. Some people have a sensitive accelerator and stiff brakes, meaning they're easily turned on and not easily turned off. Others have a stiff accelerator and sensitive brakes. They require a lot to get going, and even the smallest thing can shut desire down. And these sensitivities can shift. Maybe at 20, your accelerator was super sensitive because you had fewer stressors in your life. Maybe now at 45, your brakes are stronger because your mental load has tripled. Or maybe the complete opposite is true. Maybe your accelerator is stronger because as you age, you give less fucks about outside stuff and what other people think, and you feel freer in your body. The key here is to not expect your desire patterns to stay the same forever. Instead of resisting the changes, get curious about them. I actually have a quiz in my coaching program, Pleasured, that helps my clients identify their desire type and their accelerator and brake sensitivities. And what's fascinating is that when they take it again at the end of the program, many see a shift. Because when you work through limiting beliefs, shame, and mindset blocks, your desire patterns change too. And I go into more depth on accelerator and brakes in episode 2, Understand Your Desire. So go check it out if you want more information. Lesson 3 is desire is not a measure of good sex. We've been brainwashed by movies, TV shows, steamy Netflix scenes, thank you, Hollywood, into thinking that if we're not dying to rip each other's clothes off, the sex must be average. And as a result, many women measure their sex life by how much they want sex. If they crave it spontaneously, all is well. And if they don't, something must be wrong. But here's the thing. Desire is not a measure of good sex. Pleasure is. Think about it. If you crave sex, but the actual experience is disappointing, will you keep wanting it? Probably not. But if the sex is amazing, even if you weren't initially in the mood, you'll start wanting more and more of it. So the real question isn't, do I desire sex? It's, do I enjoy the sex I'm having? If the answer is no, then of course your brain isn't prioritizing it. Your brain is wired to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy. And if past experiences of sex weren't enjoyable, why would it push you toward more of it? It's too much effort and possibly pain for something that's not even pleasurable. Now, contrast that with something truly pleasurable. Have you ever had an amazing massage, one that melted all your stress away? You might not crave a massage every day, but if the opportunity presents itself, you're going to want it because you remember how good it felt. Sex is the same. When sex is consistently pleasurable, your brain remembers it and desire follows. Let me give you another analogy. Imagine you're exhausted after a long week of work. You have plans to go out with your friends, but getting dressed and leaving the house feels like a huge effort. You consider canceling, but you push through, go to the party, and end up having an amazing time. So much so that you can't believe you almost skipped it. Do you think you're going to look back and say, ugh, that wasn't a good party because I didn't feel excited before I got there? No, right? You'll remember the laughter, the connection, the fun. And next time you're feeling tired before a night out, you might remind yourself how great the last one was, and that will make you want to go again. This is exactly how responsive desire works with sex. If you have responsive desire, you might not feel like it before intimacy starts. Your brain might be focused on work stress, kids, exhaustion, but if the experience itself is great, if it's full of pleasure, your brain will start remembering, oh, This is actually really good. This is something I like. I want more of this. So if you're struggling with desire, instead of focusing on wanting it more, focus on making the experience itself more pleasurable. Ask yourself, how can I make sex so good that my brain will naturally prioritize it? Lesson 4, over-focusing on desire can rob you of pleasurable experiences. This ties directly into my last point. If you're constantly worrying about whether you want sex enough, you might be missing out on the actual experience of it. Here's the problem. For people with responsive desire, waiting to feel like it before engaging in sex is a losing game because desire often doesn't show up before intimacy. It actually emerges during intimacy in response to pleasure. How many times have you initially thought, not tonight, I'm not in the mood, but then decided to engage anyway, and midway through, you realized, oh, wait, this is actually really nice. But if your focus is on whether or not you feel desire in that moment, you might never even get to the part where pleasure kicks in. You can have mind-blowing sex without that I need it now urge up front. Also, over-focusing on desire can actually kill your sex drive. When you constantly check in with yourself, do I want it? Am I turned on enough? Should I feel more aroused by now? It creates pressure, and pressure is the exact thing that shuts down your libido. Instead, what if you focused on pleasure first? Instead of waiting for desire, start with touch, warmth, closeness. Instead of trying to feel aroused at first, explore what helps you get there. And instead of forcing turn on, give yourself space to enjoy the moment without pressure. Pleasure is what fuels desire, not the other way around. What if you focused on pleasure first? Instead of waiting for desire, start with touch, warmth, closeness. Instead of trying to feel aroused at first, explore what helps you get there. And instead of forcing turn on, give yourself space to enjoy the moment without pressure. Desire isn't something you either have or don't have. It's an emotion, like excitement, confidence, joy, and like any emotion, it's created by your thoughts, which means if you want to feel more desire, you need to generate the thoughts that create it. Maybe for you, it's thinking about your partner in a certain way, how they look at you, that thing they do with their hands, a memory that makes you feel wanted. Or maybe it's not even about your partner at all. Maybe it's cultivating thoughts about how sexy you feel, how good it feels to be in your body, how your sensual energy makes you feel vibrant and alive. Maybe it's daydreaming about sex, wild scenarios, all the feels, all the juicy details. Maybe it's just shifting your focus from, do I want sex right now, to what would feel good right now? If desire has felt out of reach, I invite you to explore this. What are the thoughts that create desire for you? So, lovelies, here's the takeaway. Stop waiting for desire to lead the way. It's not the boss. Pleasure is. Desire shifts, turn-ons evolve, and you can create it with your thoughts. Chase what feels good, not what you think you should feel. Ready for a little homework to kick this off? Here's your challenge this week. Write down 5 thoughts that help you feel turned on, sexy, or connected to pleasure. After that, you put them somewhere visible, on your phone, a sticky note, or your journal. And then you read them daily and notice how this shifts your energy. Desire doesn't have to be elusive. You can learn to create it. And if you're ready to go even deeper and fully connect with your pleasure, my 90-day coaching program, Pleasured, is for you. Imagine this. You know exactly what fuels your desire and how to access it anytime you want. You feel sexy, confident, and deeply connected to yourself and your partner. And you experience intimacy that's deeply fulfilling, both physically and emotionally. If that sounds like something you want, check out Pleasured. The link is in the show notes. All right, lovelies, that's it for today. Loved this episode? Share it with a friend who's stuck waiting for desire too. And I'll see you next week. Bye.